Well, well, well. You all doubted me. It took probably about a year and a half for this prediction to come true, but Liam Scales has basically won the league for Celtic. He stepped up, he got the ball, looked up, saw the keeper off his line, and went for it. And he sent a worldie into the far top corner for Aberdeen to give them the 1-0 lead against Rangers. Went on to be a 2-0 lead against Rangers and put Celtic within one win of the SPFL title. Back-to-back trophies. It's going to be for Celtic if they do win, and it's going to be against Hearts. The split fixtures are out this week, and it will be at Hearts in Edinburgh that Celtic will be looking to secure back-to-back league titles under Ange Postecoglou. Welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown. Alan Morrison and Jugo James are with me as always. James, it was never in doubt. He was always destined to do this. Liam Scales has done it. He's pulled it out.
Yeah, I was actually watching that game, and I thought of you immediately as soon as that happened. So
everybody did.
You're
everybody
in my mind.
I got tagged in multiple tweets after that goal. It just the propaganda has worked. It has worked its way into the mainstream audience.
Well, just to put a controversy onto it, Y Scout did classify it as a shot, but StatsBomb did not.
Oh, come on. It was definitely a shot.
So apparently StatsBomb, which as you know is the higher quality of the two, are calling Scales and you a liar.
That's incredibly harsh. Of course it was a shot. Like, I mean, who was he crossing the ball to? No.
Well, it's Liam Scales, probably a guy in the third row.
No, I'm not having that.
Yeah, I mean that's just. I mean, all poetry and artistry has gone out the game if that's the case. I mean, did they never see Georgie Hadji at the 1994 World Cup in the US for Romania do exactly the same thing against Colombia? I think it was.
Yeah. Roberto Carlos. These are the names that you're putting Liam Scales up with, and he's definitely delivering on that aspect. Alan, it was nice to see you last week. Some people in the comments commenting about our performance on the overlap. We actually made it onto the episode, which is nice. It was nice not to be cut out, yes. And even a couple of things that we thought were going to be cut out were involved in it. So, yeah,
yes,
good stuff.
A few things we wish had been cut out. They're also involved, also kept in, unfortunately. But there you go.
So if people haven't seen it, myself and Alan were invited on to the Celtic and Rangers special on the Overlap. It's Gary Neville's channel on YouTube. I'll link it in the description below. It's a debate around Celtic and Rangers with Chris Sutton and Ali McCoy, along with the guys from 20 Minute Tim's, Paul from Celtic Fans TV, and Quinny was there from Celtic here as well. So it was really fun, Alan. I really enjoyed it. Like it was something different, but it definitely did help being actually in a room where you could have a conversation about this. And things, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if it was going to be tense. I didn't know if there was going to be some very dodgy shit said. Thankfully, nothing was said that was over the line. But yeah, it was nice to have a proper debate in an open atmosphere like that.
Everyone was very well behaved. In fact, I think they were encouraging people, in fact, to get more involved, and they did actually use quite a bit of the material. I mean, I was really gutted. I mean, I have to say, all the other Celtic lads that turned up, they were all young, slim, handsome, well groomed. I felt like a right fat old grandfather there, but there you go. Apart from that, apart from that aspect, it was all good. I didn't realize actually, watching it back, how kind of quite cutting a lot of Celtic fans' comments were. They just had to the other lads there just had to sit there and take it, didn't they? It was quite good.
Yes. It's always fun.
I think if they were, I don't know, maybe I'm obviously biased, but I think if they scored the debate, I think it would have been stopped after about half an hour.
Loads of nice comments about your shirt. Don't be putting yourself down on your appearance. I've seen loads of people say you were looking smashing. So, don't be.
I didn't have to get my hair cut. I mean, that was the other thing. We only got a very short notice as well to attend. But no, it was good fun. I have to say. Ali McCoist was, he came across very genuine. He spent time with us all. He spoke to us all. Sutton as well. He was very good. He spent time with us after the show and so forth. So they were both excellent, as was Kelly, the host, and all the people that were producing it. It was actually, in retrospect, pretty efficient. I think it took 2 hours to film a 1 hour show, so it was actually pretty good in that sense. I mean, not that I've got any experience with these things, but it seemed pretty well done from my in retrospect, from my perspective. So yeah, listen, please give it a watch. It's I think it's quite good. Don't be put off by the kind of old firm tag to it. It was actually a decent debate, and I think the fans in the room all got a decent amount of airspace as well. So it was good.
Yeah,
James,
100%.
have you watched it yet? You can give
Yeah,
a kind of neutral, well, not neutral, but you.
No, I thought it was.
Rely
What
on
I've
you
seen
for an
so
honest
far,
opinion.
no, I got about halfway through it yesterday evening when I got to it, and then life interceded, so I'm gonna revisit and finish it today. But yeah, from what I saw, it was good. I agree with you. It was both Sutton and McCoy's, which probably isn't that surprising, were in good form and good nature. So I kept it relatively light with some good ribbing in there. So I was enjoying it up to the point I saw.
The link will be in the description below. I'll I posted the link already on our social channel. So if you want to get it, it's on YouTube on the Overlap channel, or it's linked on our Twitter channel as well. Let's get into some actual action. We'll talk about the draw at the weekend with Motherwell in just a sec, but the split fixtures have been revealed as of just a couple of hours ago, and it will be Hearts that Celtic take on after the split, after the cup game. So on Saturday, 13th of May, Celtic will be playing, Sunday, the 7th of May, Celtic will be playing Hearts, and then the final game against Rangers is the following weekend, Saturday, the 13th of May. So it will be Hearts that Celtic will be looking to win the title against after the results at the weekend. So, Alan, Hearts always seems like a trickier fixture than it might actually be or has been in the past. Again, they're a team that are going to want to stop Celtic from winning the title at their stadium. I don't know how much of a difference you think that makes, though.
I mean, listen, it's a bit, I think a lot of people are reading a lot of things into it. You don't know who's going to finish in the top six, and therefore there's always the possibility of getting an imbalance of home and away and who's played who. More times at home, etc. It can sometimes not work out, which I don't think is great, to be honest with you. I mean, I would personally prefer probably a slightly bigger Premier Division. I think there's enough teams of a similar size in Scotland. The likes of teams that aren't in there at the moment, like Dundee or Partick Thistle. I mean, I know Dunfermline and Falkirk are in the league below that, but even they're of a size that are would if given enough years to build would be competitive and a reasonably big clubs, certainly by Scottish standards. So to have a slightly bigger league, I think, and then have a split maybe at halfway or what have you, and therefore there's no sort of debate about fixtures. There's no sort of distrust about the motives for having certain games. It's first, second, or whatever. And it's just typical of Scottish football, really, that they put themselves in this situation where they can be accused of being unfair or what have you about the fixtures. When there's no need for it. I mean, other leagues do have these splits. And probably managed to manage it a little bit better than Scotland does. I think in general the split's been a good thing. I mean, the attendances in Scotland at the weekend, the last game before the split, were incredible in terms of, I think it was over 6,500, 7,000 at St Mirren. There was a good attendance. Aberdeen obviously got a good attendance. Hearts, good attendance, etc. Across the board, it was. I think. There was something like just under 2% of the population of Scotland attended football matches. It was incredible across all the matches in the country. So, that's something that I think a lot of people forget. It's just how powerful the league is, how important football is to Scottish people. That's why, as I keep saying before, it needs to be served by a better set of governors, really.
So, James, what I'm going to presume is your thoughts is that Celtic should not throw the game against Hearts next week in order to win the title against Rangers the following weekend.
Yeah, not a big fan of that idea.
They're on record to be the best team in Celtic in Scottish League
Yeah.
history. Why on earth would they throw it for such pettiness? And also,
Yeah,
why would they throw it in general? No
Yeah.
professional player is going to do that.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the relative prioritization for some people. But yeah, I think we'll see. Naismith could change some things up. Like we the running joke with Hearts under Nielsen was how naively predictable they had been against Celtic, and we just don't know. I mean, obviously it's an unknown coming in with Naismith. They do have some attacking talent that can hurt you, and that playing at Tynecastle, is more of a chaos ingredient that can because of the dimensions of the pitch being smaller, and if they go more direct and long ball, that kind of thing. So it could be a less comfortable situation. And as we'll get on to with the Motherwell game, with us being down a couple of guys, we're still not sure who's going to be back in time for this weekend, maybe even for Hearts. We're probably not at our peak right now as far as recent form. So I wouldn't write off Hearts at home. Again, obviously it should be a relatively comfortable game, but within the span of the spectrum of distribution, I'd probably have more anxiety going into playing at Tynecastle in these circumstances than normal. So I would go for St. Mirren at home. That would have been my preference.
Well, I mean, you want to wrap up the title as soon as possible.
Exactly.
That's the bottom line of these things, is that there is absolutely no point going into these games thinking further down the line other than winning the title, because it takes all the pressure off the squad. I guarantee you'll see some rotation after the fact, and you'll get to give players who might not usually get the opportunity to play many games an opportunity then for the rest of the season. That's kind of where I like the split, and where I think it comes in handy is that generally the title, not always, but generally the title has been in the last decade sewn up by the time the split comes around. And then in the final 6 fixtures, you see younger players and players that are on the fringes get some opportunity, which they don't usually get during the season. So yeah, I think it's all guns blazing for the Hearts game, and then relax for the rest of the season because you've already won the title. And in terms of the game at the weekend then, so Celtic didn't really get themselves into this position based upon their form last week. They've done it over the course of the season, but the draw against Motherwell, 1-1 at home, Cal McGregor with the only goal for Celtic, and then Kevin Van Veen with a goal on the 55th minute to give Motherwell the draw. It came because Liam Scales gave Aberdeen the win over Rangers. But a lot of disappointment after this game, a lot of annoyances after this game, rightly so. It was a disappointing performance. At home is probably the key point, is that it was a sunny day at Celtic Park, and it was probably a lackluster performance. But Alan, was this a tired performance? Is that what it was from Celtic? Was it the fact that they were rotating? Was it the fact that some players weren't fully fit? Cameron Carter-Vickers came into this game, which I thought was a little bit surprising. Is that what you put it down to, or was it something tactical that just didn't work for Celtic?
Sure. So listen, it's rarely one thing. Okay, so I think there's a few things came together. I think in terms of Celtic and their own performance is concerned, what we saw worked quite well in the previous game, whereby McGregor and Iwata, and I'll start with the midfield because I think we've talked about it a lot on this program. I think it's something that we feel is probably not optimally set in terms of the squad at the moment. So the midfield, McGregor and Iwata done quite a nice job of kind of rotating, and really, although it was, you could make a case for saying it was a kind of 4-2-3-1. as always, as I keep saying, it's really just a sort of how they line up at kickoff. It's really where do the players go to find the spaces. What the problem I think Celtic had on the weekend was really two compounding issues. One is the lack of width. That was the first thing. So the fullbacks especially really didn't give Celtic that much overlapping width, and the wingers, Maeda's kind of out to in run is a kind of trademark, and he had two good chances in the first half. One header at the back post, which was saved, and then a ball on the stretch from an excellent Haksabanovic through ball that he just put wide. So he did get some joy from those out to in on runs, but into out to in runs even. But he did really get on the ball that much. Other than that, and with Haksabanovic, in a day where Celtic were oddly almost totally right side dominant, which is not something we see from Celtic very often. Normally, we're very left side dominant. Haksabanovic got plenty of the ball, but he really just kept cutting in and running into traffic and losing it without really creating a lot. So what that also meant was that the midfield got pretty crowded. So they set up with three at the back. It was really a 5-3-2. We've seen this shape from teams many times before. They look to sort of make the middle as crowded as possible, and we kind of played into that because the fullback sort of inverted. If you look at the heat maps, McGregor, it looks like McGregor and Iwata are eventually standing on each other's heads. Now, obviously, they weren't, but it just meant they were kind of constantly rotating and occupying very much the same space. And although I thought McGregor actually was probably the bright spot for Celtic on the day, Iwata struggled a bit to get forward and didn't really get past Kyogo at any point in the game. And so I think that there was that. I think there was also the case of sometimes you just have one of those days. I mean, the chances didn't go in, right? So it was one of those days where Celtic tried to get the ball across the box a lot low, and yet all the chances that we created, nearly all the chances Celtic created from crosses ended up being headers, and that's never a very sure way to score, and obviously we didn't finish them. Matt O'Reilly had a particularly interesting day. I know a lot of people were frustrated by his performance, but he created 5 chances. He won the ball back more than anyone else, as well. He had a lot of passes in there. He got into the box more than anybody else. It just nothing came off for him. It was as simple as that. You couldn't fault him for trying to force things, trying to make things happen. But he was having an off day, or things weren't going his way, and whereas we've got other risk takers like Hatate, Jota, Abada who are all missing. We can't make. I don't want to make those excuses, but we didn't have any other kind of risk takers, if you like, for whom perhaps one of those things might have come off. So I think that there was that. I mean, I don't want to be churlish to Motherwell because well done to them for getting a point at Celtic Park. The only team to do it this season. I thought they defended manfully. I thought they kept their shape and discipline in terms of and their fitness. Unlike other teams, it didn't really drop as the game went on. So fair play to them for that. I don't think they did anything extraordinary. They didn't do anything that was like, oh wow, that's interesting. Why haven't other teams tried that? They were actually rubbish on the ball, Motherwell. Apart from they twice got the ball to Van Veen, his goal was fantastic. I mean, it was a very unexpected burst of pace to drive Taylor back into the box, and it was a great finish. And he had another run shortly after that, and really a bit of individualism got them that goal. And they didn't really create anything else of any note throughout the game, or nor did they put Celtic under any sort of pressure. So sometimes the risks as well around how Celtic play just come to fruition, right? And this is one of those days where all the things I've talked about came together really to, the goal that Celtic conceded, it was off a corner, off a Celtic corner. Matt O'Reilly loses the ball on the edge of Motherwell's box, and suddenly there's only 3 players between Slattery and the goal. He picks out a great pass actually to Van Veen because he curls it away from Taylor into Van Veen's path. And as happens with Celtic, it's a 1v1 at the back. Now, 90+% this season, that situation has arisen. A, it doesn't happen very often, and B, when it does, the either the attacker lacks the quality to make something of it, or Celtic's defenders are good enough to snuff it out. But on this occasion, Van Veen was good enough to do something with it. So, I wouldn't be concerned in the sense of there's no sort of. I think there was a great disappointment because, like you say, it's getting to the end of the season. We kind of got this view that Postecoglou will really get them firing because it's a big game and it's getting to the business end of the season. And it was just a surprise. We've been so consistent and that we maybe didn't expect to have a slightly off performance. But as I say, it was one of those days. I think a little bit of credit to Motherwell, a lot of credit to Van Veen, and but not. I think if I was to say what would be the thing they'd be looking for, it would be just that attacking spacing, the way that the players attacked the space in the final third. I don't think was really smart, and that might have been just the players in midfield, especially not having played together that much.
Yeah, James, looking through the data from this game, and I'm working off FatMob, so there might be slight changes to the likes of StatsBomb or whatever. So on the base level, Celtic had 78% possession to Motherwell's 22, had almost 5 times as many accurate passes, 16 shots, 5 big chances, XG 2.04 to 0.8 to Motherwell. And then you look at the momentum sort of graphic that they do throughout the game, and it's pretty much all green except for the 5 minutes after Motherwell equalized from Van Veen after the 55th minute. I mean, again, the game's not all down to stats, but if you look at the overall game as a whole in the aftermath of it, taking the emotion out of it, it does seem like this is sort of just an outlier of a game where things didn't go correct at the final point for Celtic.
Yeah, I'd say on the margin, the thing that stood out, again, if you just benchmark performance, our XG from open play was definitely well below kind of norms, particularly playing at home, and even more so for a team in the bottom half. So, as far as a measurable goes, and that's everything that Alan talked about, I agree with, and that metric kind of reflected that. I think what the game also speaks to is, Motherwell, as Alan said, were organized, relatively disciplined. They fielded a team of relatively young and in shape dudes, right? So they had, I think, a 19-year-old at one wing back and like a 20-year-old at the other one. And for SPFL Motherwell level, their midfield's big and kind of, in shape, right? I mean, that's always been the Motherwell, even though Robinson was there. It wasn't going to be because of lack of effort or guys not being in shape. So when you put those things together and you have a guy like Van Veen, which again, for a Motherwell level team, he is inordinately skilled, right? So the vast majority of these kind of teams that we only concede 1 or 2, even theoretical chances, vast majority of the time, the opposition players are not skillful enough, even if they're fast enough. And Van Veen's one of these guys who he's not all that fast, but he was going up against a guy who's not that fast, who had really bad technique on this instance in Taylor. And he just, whooped his ass one-on-one. And that can happen because he's a really skillful guy. And his production for a team of Motherwell's, resources is really, really good in the league. So so if, in summary is, all the script I always talk about, that St. Mirren script, and, Motherwell did not try to play a way that, exposes their weaknesses, right? So they were dreadful on the ball, which is typically what they are. And therefore they weren't trying to ticky-tack it from out of the back very much, right? They just got it up the field. And if Van Veen got on it, that was good. If not, they just got right back into shape. And they're hoping to get a draw, maybe a goal, and we have a bad day finishing. And that really is the calculation for most of these teams, if I think, in my judgment, that's most reasonable. And that's how they played, and they got their just rewards because they kept it close, and we had an off day. And as Alan said, we kind of had a creativity deficit in the side. So, I think when you mix it all together, it's just we are a spoiled bunch of a-holes too,
We
given
are. Yeah.
how great things have been. So this is kind of a classic late season performance in a league that's kind of already done.
Can I bring up my left footer conspiracy theory again?
Of
I know
course.
it's been a while. So I don't think a right-footed player gets turned inside out as much as Greg Taylor does. I often find that left footers, because they're so much more comfortable on their left side, that they get thrown off balance a little bit more when they get turned inside out. I've no evidence to back that up at all. It's just my gut feeling, but I reckon
I've never seen Liam Scales get turned out inside out like that, and he's left-footed.
Yeah.
So your theory just falls over.
Well, funny enough, I have. So, but we'll pretend that never happened.
Yeah, that's just a classic. Across sports. I mean, you just don't turn your back on someone coming at you. So
somebody in the comments makes the point that he should never have been one-on-one with Greg Taylor anyway. Why is Greg Taylor the last man?
That goes down. That goes Alan's point. I think it was off a corner kick. So there was, he's usually the last person back, and they made a nice out ball, and so to me it was more so. Even if he would have ended up getting beaten, but he whooped them. Like that's a, to use my old basketball saying, that's like you tell a guy to go pick up his jock strap, right? Because you just juked him out of his skivvies. So that's basically what Van Veen did to him. He, embarrassed him. And that oftentimes when that happens, it's because of very poor technique. And I think that's what Taylor did there. I mean, you don't turn your back on somebody. That never works out well. And again, a guy like Van Veen, Taylor does that 9 out of 10 times against the vast majority of players in the league. He's probably okay because the guy's going to balloon the shot or trip over the ball or, one of many outcomes. And, Van Veen's a dangerous enough guy that he made him look really bad.
That might be the most American thing that you've said on the show.
Pick up your jock.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. It's right up there, number one, along with the other references that I generally don't understand. But Alan,
you guys don't protect your balls in Ireland when you're playing sports? What do you wear? You don't wear a cup at all? You never wear a jock strap?
No.
Jesus.
It's not a thing over here.
Yeah. Well, you don't have testicles over there? What's going on?
moving swiftly on from men's genitalia. Alan, you said that Matt O'Reilly had an interesting performance. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, just in terms of, it was one of these classics watching the game. I think I even read some comments that people were getting frustrated at him, and one of the WhatsApp groups, someone was going, "Oh, I'm not sure I love him anymore," and all this sort of thing. And I was like, "Yeah, it did seem quite frustrating for him. He did. I mean, it was extraordinary the amount of times he gave the ball away actually in the final third without really producing anything. I think if I can just you just bear with me. Sorry, this is a bit real time, but because it was an extraordinary number actually. Final third losses, so it was 6 for O'Reilly in the first half and 7 for Haksabanovic, and then the second half it was 9 for O'Reilly. So that's 15 times in the second half he kind of lost the ball without creating anything or winning a corner or getting a shot off. Right, that's a pretty high number. Right? To be honest, that is a really high number. So it wasn't a good day. But on the other hand, like I say, he also easily had the most chances. He created 5 chances for others in the game as well. He won that ball back high quite a few times, especially in the first half in that sort of way, which I know for a fact that people don't always notice. He just seems to get a foot in, and suddenly Celtic have got the ball back, and it's not like a big blood and snorters tackle as we'd call it over here. It's it's just a subtle foot in, and he's very effective at that. He didn't. I don't think he got many shots away. In fact, none. Didn't take any shots at all. So that probably counted against him. But as I say, he just got the ball a lot in the final third. He really was almost carrying the team in terms of that final third threat, because Maeda didn't create much. He got on the end of a couple of things. Haksabanovic, I have to be honest, he's started 2 games in a row now on the right wing, and I don't think he's done himself any favours in terms of what he's produced for the team. So we weren't getting a lot out of him, and obviously Kyogo, he's only going to come to life when you get the ball to him. And with Iwata and McGregor sort of playing, not deep, but sort of playing a more reserved role, it really was left to Matt O'Reilly to kind of be that creative player, and he had to take it all on his shoulders. And he had an off day. A lot of things didn't come off for him, but he didn't hide, and he kept going. I was actually watching it back. It was the only slight misstep, I think, from Postecoglou, was taking O'Reilly off. I didn't think he should have taken him off. I know he brought Vata on, and Vata had a couple of nice moments and was actually pretty direct on the right wing, and the boy did well for himself there. But I wouldn't have taken O'Reilly off, because he was the only one that was really trying consistently to change the game.
Yeah,
Well, there's a comment in from.
I was just going to say, and Kyogo kind of dropped into that role, and he didn't do much. He didn't fare much better when he was on the ball in trying to create anything. So
I was just going to go to a comment here from Hit the Top, who said that no Jota, no Hatate, O'Reilly is carrying a lot for the team in terms of playmaking terms, and that is true. If you look at Celtic's midfield, or include the wingers as well, the most creative players are Jota, Hatate, O'Reilly, Haksabanovic when he's on the left potentially, but outside of that, Maeda's not a playmaker, Kyogo's not a playmaker, McGregor's certainly not a playmaker, and from what we've seen, Iwata isn't that creative either. So we've got 2 to 3 very creative players, and 2 of them are out injured at the minute. So it's all on O'Reilly. If nothing comes through him, then Celtic might not create all that much unless it comes from the likes of Aaron Moy, who is also out injured. So a lot of key players missing is probably the best sort of context you could have for why Celtic didn't create many of really good chances. And they did create a few chances and had a few half chances from outside the box as well. But outside of that, is that a worry for this weekend, let's say, or do we think that some of those players who were rested for this game were rested on the idea that they will be playing this weekend?
For me, it's a worry. I think it has to be, just because of depth issues and, for all their various foibles, they are a significant step up in quality as far as opposition goes. So, we need to get that chance creation from somewhere. Now, the positive side is that oftentimes against them, we're going to have more space, so a guy like O'Reilly, is probably going to have a better opportunity to pick out some of those passes where, again, to their credit, Motherwell kept things very compact. So I suspect, Rangers are less likely to be that rigid in defending. So it's a little easier to catch them out, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a worry. It'll be interesting, I think, again, to see kind of how Ange ends up going. To Alan's point, it's kind of become more of a hybrid 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 rather than more of a pure 4-3-3. Again, within the context of movement. So we'll see if that continues to be, kind of the direction we go, with Iwata being the appeared preferred choice along with McGregor. But again, that might be because Moy's still getting back up to speed. We'll just have to see. But I'm not sure a Moy O'Reilly midfield's not sure that's in a 4-3-3, of them being a 2 attacking eights. I'm not sure that's the prescription either. So it's going to be interesting.
What do you think, Alan? Because there was debate around Cameron Carter-Vickers after it's been revealed he's been playing through injury for what would appear for a long period of time. Worries that he's going to miss the semi-final this weekend. Is this testing the waters, or is this he's ready to play and ready to go, and we're definitely going to throw him in for Carter-Vickers as well as sort of the rest of them, like Hatate? Do you think, are any of them going to make it for the semi-final?
Yeah, I don't know, and it's very difficult to tell from from Postecoglou. He keeps very tight on that one. On the Carter-Vickers, so I had been told by two separate people about Carter Vickers' knee. Now, it's not the sort of thing, because it's to do with the player's health, that, well, A, it wouldn't betray that confidence, and B, I don't think it's a sort of appropriate thing to necessarily let slip. But it was something I was aware of and worried about, because I don't like the idea of players playing on with knee injuries that need surgery potentially. So, having said that, um, he was playing to me like you couldn't tell you couldn't tell that he had a knee problem the way he was playing, really. But obviously he was not risked for that Kilmarnock game on that pitch. And on the weekend, I thought he was just a little bit sluggish. He was noticeably not as involved in the game as Starfelt was, even in just simple ball recycling. And even though Celtic were very heavily dominant down that right side, which is his station, it wasn't coming through him in terms of getting the attack started. So definitely a concern. That's going to be interesting. Both teams are going to have decisions to make on that front, because on their side, Connor Goldson's been out with a hip flexor issue, and that's Mickey told us that in one of his many long-winded expositions that he loves to give, that he let it blurt out that it was a hip flexor injury, which is, I don't know if any of you have ever had a hip flexor injury, but it's not a nice injury. And if they're going to rush Goldson back for the game on that injury, that's a real risk. As I think it would be if there's any doubt at all about Carter Vickers. And it's not a risk I would necessarily advocate, but I suspect the way it's going, it looks like he's going to play. Then question for Celtic is, what do you do about especially the midfield and really right wing, because in 2 games Haksabanovic has not impressed in that position. It's only fair to be honest about that. I suspect that, looking at it, for me, Hatate has been out now for, I'm just apologize if someone's got this to their fingertips, but I mean, he's been out since the beginning of April, so nearly a month it will be that Hatate's been out. Now, that's quite a long time to suddenly be thrown back into a big game. So, and again, if there's any doubt about him, I wouldn't want to see him thrown back into a game like that. Jota's not been missing as long, so if Jota's good to go, that would probably solve a lot of problems, to be honest. And I think then we would probably be comfortable with most configurations in central midfield if Jota was back. If Jota is missing, then the question is, what do we do about that right wing slot? Do you persist with Haksabanovic but try and get him to hold his width a bit more? Do you gamble on Vata? That doesn't feel like a Postecoglou call, but you never know. Do you go with Moy and O'Reilly, because it just gives you that little bit of extra creativity in the middle? I mean, Iwata's really done nothing wrong since he's come in. He's just a very different sort of player. So I think there's a lot to think about there, and it's something I'm going to think about over the next couple of days and probably write up at some point. But yeah, I think there's quite a few conundrums there for Celtic to think about.
Yeah, I think Jota is probably the biggest miss out of all of that if he does miss this game, because as much as Hatate is that creative spark in the midfield, Jota has, he is the link between the midfield and the forward 9, especially if it's Maeda and Kyogo playing there, because Maeda is a get in behind the defense kind of player and Kyogo is a poacher, whereas Jota is the only one that you kind of trust in that to get on the ball as much as he does. So if he's missing, I think it could be a huge loss for Celtic and what they can do going forward, whether they have Moy back. I mean, I'm not going to comment on Moy's performance, because last time I did, I said that he was the most confident in the midfield to take the ball and control it and not give it away, and he must have given it away about 10 times in the first 5 minutes. So I'm not going to comment on.
No more jinxing from you, Enda.
No, I'm going to keep my predictions to myself these days. But yeah, no, generally, look, it's not ideal to be missing this many players going into a derby match, James, but I'm going off the basis of the Ibrox game that we drew, where we had a couple of players out from a virus. The previous derby that Celtic played badly in, and we're still missing these players, certain players, and still came out with a win. I still fancy Celtic to at least send it to extra time if they're not at their best. I still don't think there's enough in the Rangers team to beat Celtic flat out.
Yeah, I think the thing I've kept coming back to this season is that we've got the at least from a consistency perspective. You can always say the one-off game, but they still have a black hole playing between the sticks for them this season. And McGregor, he's been amongst the worst keepers. I just wrote a piece on this for this week, looking at our needs heading into Champions League next year. And Alan McGregor's been one of the worst keepers in world football this year. So, yeah, I think that's a huge positive for us. But yeah, I was just thinking as Alan was talking about Carter Vickers, and again, this is me purely speculating, but again, being relatively old and been a sports junkie all my life across a bunch of sports, that sounds like a meniscus tear to me. Meaning that if they're talking about surgery, but they're letting a guy play, it's his knee. Normally, that's not a partial ligament tear or anything like major structural.
If it was ligaments, he wouldn't be playing. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So usually that's something dealing with cartilage and a partial tear, and really that's all about managing swelling and pain. So until they do the surgery, and then you've got the 8 weeks kind of or 12 weeks kind of recovery timeline, as long as it's not a major one. But so yeah, I mean, a guy out playing with a bum cartilage would not be great. I mean, that's the kind of thing that can you just turn a little bit off and it sends that shock wave of pain through you, and tells you not to move that way. So yeah, that's concerning. And given the depth issues, you put a guy on who's going to try and gut it out, and then for whatever reason you got to take him off. All of a sudden you're down a sub, and we're relatively thin compared to where we have been. So do you have to carry an extra center back or an extra defender because of that? There's all these compounding questions that get, particularly with it being a semifinal and potentially going to extra time, that kind of thing. So yeah, it'll be really interesting, I think, to see how Ange addresses these questions, because there are material ones here, and it's almost impossible to have a good sense of risk and reward until we know who is actually available. Again, Hatate being out this long sounds like, what do they say, like grade 2 or grade 1 strain. I think it was his hamstring. So that's more of a significant thing. And I don't think you just come back into this kind of game recovering from that kind of injury. It tends to be something you have to ramp up into. So yeah, it's I probably the only thing I can say it might be somewhat constructive is if we're left with Haksabanovic and Maeda, I'd almost rather see him flipped. I mean, I don't see the relative strength of playing them the way that they have been. Meaning that if you're in a deficit for creativity, Haksabanovic seems to be more comfortable doing that coming in from the left onto his strong foot. Maeda is not terribly going to do, he's not going to do much of that regardless. So that's probably the only observation I have as far as what seems like it might be the options available.
Well,
yeah, I think the players that are injured
signature.
Sorry, and I was sorry.
Ahead,
I was just going to say, I think the players in general, the players that are injured have just been out for too long to suddenly throw them in. The only one, Jota, has been out for a couple of weeks. If he's good to go, that's probably quite low risk throwing him back in again. But the likes of Forrest, Abada, Hatate, they've been out for too long now. I don't think you can just, unless they've been training hard for a couple of weeks, I don't know that you could just throw them in on a week's training. I think that would be really probably quite unwise. So I think we're going to have to make some compromises here.
So I guess you're going to agree with my starting 11 then, which would be Benjamin Siegrist, Anthony Ralston, Starfelt, Kobayashi, Burnaby at left back. Midfield, James McCarthy, give him a chance with Iwata and Rokovata as the number 10. And then up front, go with Kyogo on the left, O through the middle, and James Forrest on the right. So that's my starting 11 prediction. I think that'll do it, will it?
Isn't the Celtic Da? Is that the Celtic Da prediction? You're the youngest one here. Enda. He shouldn't be coming up with a da lineups.
No joke. No joke. I had to look up whether James McCarthy still played for Celtic. I couldn't remember if he had left in January on the fly or not. I like it. He's just gone, isn't he? He's just non-existent. What a signing he's turning out to be. Who could have predicted that one? Right. Well, I guess all joking aside, as a centre back partnership, if we're talking about Cameron Carter-Vickers, let's say 70% fit without, going into it too much. Do you trust, from what we've seen, Starfelt on the right and Kobayashi as the partnership in the derby match?
It's tough.
I'm happier with. Sorry, James. I was going to say I'm happier with Starfoot on the right. Definitely. I wouldn't be happy about Carter Vickers being missing, because I think arguably Carter Vickers for us and Connor Goldson for them are the two most important players in either team in terms of defensive solidity. Because the other options are not great. I don't mean Kobayashi particularly, because it's still very early for him, and actually he's done a pretty good job. He seems confident. He likes to get on the ball. He likes to ping the ball firmly through into midfield. And he seems to be pretty decent defensively as well. But it's clearly a risk just throwing him into this game. And then anyway, if Carter Vickers is to have an operation as speculated, then you wouldn't bring him back for the Motherwell game and then suddenly decide to put him in for an operation. You'd have done it 2 weeks ago. So I think we can talk about it if you want, but barring an injury in training, Carter Vickers is going to start and Starfelt's going to be on the left. I don't think there's much to debate around that one, to be honest with you. But I do think Starfelt looked happier on the right, and not surprisingly, really, given his style of play.
James, you were going to come in there, were you?
Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, I'm not. Sports are the legendary stories of sports of guys playing hurt and coming up with big performances. I mean, they're very romantic, and but there's also plenty of times when guys try it and it turns out to be a mess. So yeah, I just hope whatever they decide to do, that he's up to it, and because again, the margin for error here is a lot smaller, just given the sheer speed and athleticism of the opposition. So despite, like I say, their foibles, Ryan Kent or Sakala running at you at full speed, if you've got a bum knee, is a different proposition than descending on Motherwell and not really having too much to deal with. So yeah, it's again, it just adds to the litany of questions that we have going into this, which again kind of makes me a little nervous as a result.
Mm-hmm. Anything you guys want to touch on, be that from the Motherwell game or the game coming up this weekend, before we call it a quits on this fixture?
I think equally for the Rangers, it's similar. Actually, very similar issues that they've got around their selection. If Goldson managing that hip flexor. I mean, we've seen in recent weeks that as I said before the last derby, that for me Davis is the weak link in that defence. Anyway, and then Suter's obviously we know Suter. He's a good solid lad, but he doesn't lift the quality. Really, he's not a game changer in that sense, and he has got a mistake in him as well. So as a pair, there's definitely some vulnerability there. And then in midfield, I mean, they seem inordinately pleased with themselves that they've got Raskin and Cantwell. I mean, Raskin looks like a nice footballer. He's tidy. He's good on the ball. He's got good feet, technically good. He's got a little bit of pace about him and a little bit of strength about him as well. But he also has, I've seen him also quite overpowered in games, and teams just running over the top of him as well. And he's a young kid, right? And he's going to take a bit of time to get used to the peculiarities of Scottish football. And Cantwell is, I mean, if you watched him against Aberdeen, and we've all played with players like this, who when things go badly, he just decides to play his own game. I mean, I have no idea what he was doing. He was going all over the pitch. Now, maybe he had orders to do that, but he was nominally the number 10, and he just looks like a player that will just do what the hell he wants, and he's just not a team player. And that's pretty consistent with the fact that Norwich were very keen to get rid, really. And that's kind of where they are in many respects. I mean, they've signed a couple of players recently. Raskin, Cantwell, and then last year, Lundstrom, who were all not good in the dressing room, if you like, were deemed, really troublemakers either by their manager or their teammates. And when you're shopping in distressed markets, these are the choices that you end up having to make. So their configuration for midfield is interesting, but also their approach is, in the 3-2 game, in the cup final game, they tried to be very solid and physical and tried to turn the game into a bit of an arm wrestle. And all Celtic did was just run past them, and they weren't tracking the runners. And it was a pretty comfortable afternoon for Celtic. In the 3-2 game, they pressed really, really high up the pitch, and that was quite successful. But equally, Celtic were able to press them very high up the pitch and win the ball back as well, which often got forgotten. And then when they did get the ball, there wasn't really a lot happening with it unless there was a free kick situation or a corner situation. So what do they do this time? Do they go with the more ball playing players like Raskin and Cantwell and Tillman and try and press Celtic high and hope to win something high up? But then probably you're losing a lot of solidity and defensive capability in midfield, or do they try and make it again more of an arm wrestle with the likes of Lundstrom, Jack, players like that? So I don't know. I don't know which way they'll go. We don't know which way Mickey will go. I mean, he's changed his approach in games against Celtic, so we don't know what we're going to get. I think we know what we're going to get. Well, we don't know what we're going to get from Celtic. So there's a lot more uncertainty in this game, I think, given the injury situations and the tactical choices than I think there would be normally. So yeah, lots of intrigue.
Ditto.
I was waiting for your input there.
Well, that was the New York Times Wordle word 2 days ago as well. Ditto.
Are you still doing Wordle over there?
My wife does it, so it's one of those things. It's cheaper than therapy or a divorce lawyer.
Breaking news: Stuart Robertson's left across the city, so he's their CEO. In case you're
okay.
The significance. I know the significance of that is that, how can I put this delicately? He was actually a reasonably competent individual who wasn't there because of his staunch credentials. Let's put it that way. Somebody who's actually there to do a professional job. And that's effectively, once again, the mob have hounded out. They managed to hound out Wilson. I think Wilson got sick of being hung out to dry by the club as well. The banners and so forth. Robertson and both, let's be honest about it. Both Robertson and Wilson were targeted because they are not staunch brogue wearers. They are guys that were there to do a job. Now that we can argue the merits of did they do a great job. I mean, I would argue both of them had one hand tied behind their back in terms of the financial situation there. So that's not good news. I know it's probably not going to affect what happens on the pitch on the weekend, but it's big news as far as looking ahead to the summer, looking ahead to the prospects in terms of them acting like a well-run professional outfit, frankly. So that's probably one front of the day. I will get Kieran Maguire on the program to do a Celtic and do an old firm finance special. But let's get the semi-final out of the way. Let's get hopefully the league tied up, and then the hopefully be a few weeks of space then to start getting into that debate in the run up to summer. But I think that's significant. I mean, it's significant really about the internal health of that club.
Well, I would say that with my limited knowledge of how businesses work, the CEO stepping down as the club is handing out shares for candy, then it's not really a good look of how the business is doing in the background. So I would imagine could be some news on that in the next couple of weeks with everything that has been mentioned on the podcast before, but we'll we'll touch on that maybe with Kieran Maguire, because he's probably in a better position than any of us to touch on that. I think that's where we'll park the show then, unless there's anything else. James, anything from you?
No, sounds good.
No American analogies before?
I think people have had enough for this week. I'll save them up for next week.
Yeah, do bank them in, and we'll keep them coming over the next couple of weeks. Thanks to everyone in the comments for joining in as always, and keep the comments coming. Like the video so more people can see them, and if you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel as well. You'll get notified every time we go live like this on a weekday, usually a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and you can get the podcast in all the usual podcast places. And we shall chat to you next week with a Old Firm review. Chat to you later. Good luck.